All right, today we are cracking open a really fascinating case file. It feels less like a crime and more like an old myth, you know? It's all about a high mountain kingdom, a general absolutely consumed by his own pride, and one single, shimmering lantern. But when you dig into it, this is really an investigation into free will, a tragic fall from grace, and the long, hard road back to hope.
So, we're going to follow the evidence across 6 key chapters. We'll start with the general's bitter ambition, move through this really complex test of loyalty, and follow it all the way to the final and maybe surprising verdict. Let's dive in.
You know, every story about a major fall from grace has a starting point. In this one, it doesn't begin with a huge battle, but with a quiet, corrosive emotion, pride. We're about to see how the bitter ambition of just one general could ignite a conflict that would end up changing everything.
And there it is, right there. The motive, laid completely bare. The general's rebellion wasn't about injustice. It was about pure, uncut pride. I mean, think about it. He was a glorious, respected leader of the guard. He had power, but it just wasn't enough for him. That feeling, that inability to be the number one guy, it just festered inside him until it poisoned every single thing he did.
This is where you see the general's real cunning. He didn't just rebel, he was smart. He weaponized perception. He took the king's laws, which were designed to be a shield to keep people safe, and he reframed them. He called them shackles, chains of oppression. It was a lie, but it was a powerful one, and it was enough to fuel his uprising with a small group of soldiers.
Well, spoiler alert, it didn't work. His power was nothing compared to the king's overwhelming light. The entire uprising was crushed in a heartbeat. But when he was cast out, down into the dark, barren valleys, his pride didn't break. Oh no. It just curdled. It turned into this new destructive goal. If he couldn't rule, he was gonna ruin. So the general's fall is one piece of the puzzle. But the king's response, that's where this story gets really complex. He knew exactly what was in the general's heart, deception and spite. And that raises a really important question. This is the central mystery, isn't it? The king could have easily built this impenetrable wall around his favorite village, kept them perfectly safe, but he didn't. Instead, he allowed the threat to get close. He chose to set up a test, a really high-stakes trial of loyalty and trust.
And this gets right to the heart of the king's entire philosophy. It's this concept he called hollow love. He truly believed that you can't force loyalty. For their love to mean anything, for it to be real and genuine, his people had to have the freedom to choose him, or to choose to walk away.
But this wasn't some cruel act of abandonment. The king wasn't just throwing them to the wolves. He put a safety net in place. His son, the prince, saw this dark shadow approaching, and he vowed that he would be a guiding light for the villagers if they truly lost their way. So the stage was set, a test of free will, up against a very determined tempter.
So, now we get to the infiltration itself. The rules of the test are in place, and the general puts his plan of ruin into motion. And his method, it's all about simple, powerful deception.
You know, his method was brilliant in how simple it was. He didn't bring an army. He just showed up in the disguise of a traveling merchant. He didn't carry a sword. He carried this beautiful, alluring, and totally forbidden lantern. And the promise he made wasn't for wealth or power. It was for something way more tempting: the king's own wisdom. The chance to see the world just like he did.
And this is the moment it all comes to a head. The climax of the case, the point of decision, and for the villagers, the point of no return.
The general found a young woman and whispered that simple, powerful promise. You can be more than just a villager. You can see as the king sees. And she chose to believe him. She lit the lantern, going against the king's one single command. And when her husband saw what she'd done, he was faced with losing her, so he chose to join her. A choice made out of love, but one that would have absolutely devastating consequences.
And what happened next? Was there a flash of incredible wisdom? Not a chance. The opposite. The second they both joined in the act, that shimmering light just went out. It died, plunging them into a sudden, cold, and really frightening darkness. The promise was a total lie.
So, the transgression is complete. Now we can step back and really analyze the fallout. What was the actual outcome here? And what was the king's true purpose in letting all of this happen in the first place?
This, right here, is the ultimate irony of this whole case. The general, he thought he'd won. He believed he had ruined the king's favorite creation, but in reality, his act of pure hate became just another tool in the king's much, much bigger plan, a plan to cultivate a kind of faith that wasn't just innocent, but was strong and truly resilient.
So what about the general's supposed great victory? Well, it was completely hollow. He didn't win a new kingdom. He just got more subjects to share in his own suffering. It turns out that every time he tried to strike at the king, he only succeeded in making his own exile more miserable, until he was nothing more than a shivering shadow hiding in the grass.
So here's the crucial takeaway. The king allowed this darkness to enter, not because he was cruel, but because he knew that only by experiencing the cold could the villagers ever truly understand and appreciate the warmth of the sun. It suggests that real goodness is something that has to be deliberately harvested, and that even this terrible tragedy became part of a larger plan of grace.
And that brings us to the final chapter, the verdict. The couple made their choice, they disobeyed, and they were exiled from the village. But that is not where their story, or this case file, ends.
They weren't just cast out with nothing. Just like he promised he would, the prince stepped in. He gave them a map. It was a promise that, yeah, this home was lost, but a new one was already being built for those who could learn how to walk in the dark.
So they left not just in exile, but completely transformed. They weren't innocent anymore, sure, but they also weren't untested. They walked out into a harsh new world, carrying something they never had before, a hard-won wisdom and that tiny, flickering spark of a promise.
And that's where we're going to close this file, with one last, provocative thought. The story of the Lantern of Exile really forces us to ask ourselves what we value more, a simple, untested innocence, or the profound and often painful wisdom that you can only gain through choice, consequence, and the enduring hope for redemption.